Hi there. I'm back here live and had a little bit of a false start. I want to say a big thank you to Richard for pointing out that I was sideways. I did get a little kind of notification about that, but then it seemed to be okay. So thanks so much, Richard, for that. And with that said, we'll start over here. So I'm recording a podcast reply to 4 people, and I thought I'd do it as a Facebook Live. So that's where we're at. So let me start over here. Hi there, hope you're doing really well today. Daniel back here, and a little bit nervous, second time I'm doing this, but I'm doing this as a Facebook Live at the same time recording this podcast. So I hope that doesn't show too much. I'm hopefully gonna be able to deliver good answers here. So with that said, as mentioned, there are 4 people that have submitted some questions or comments or whatnot that we're going to talk about. So the first one is from Chrissy, who left a comment on a Facebook post. So I'm going to read it right now. New question. I like to drink a glass of wine in the evenings. It helps me relax and fall asleep, but I don't stay asleep. I drank a glass of wine last night and fell asleep, but woke up at 3:30 a.m. The last 3 to 4 nights, I've been able to fall asleep between 10:30 and 11 p.m. and sleep for about 6 hours. No wine. So my question is, how many hours before bed should I enjoy my glass of wine without it affecting my sleep? Great question. And I'll say right off the bat that I don't know what that number is, but there's a whole lot to talk about here that I think is important. So first of all, what you're describing here is typical for alcohol. Alcohol is sedating and it can kind of calm us down and make it a bit easier to fall asleep. But then it typically causes, or it often causes, for many people, it causes sleep fragmentation later on. Sleep becomes like you wake up and you have a hard time falling back asleep again. Now, if somebody enjoys a glass of wine in the evening and they sleep good, then that of course is fine. But if this tends to happen, what should your approach be? Well, I think that it's important to note that we all kind of metabolize wine differently. For some it's very rapidly out of your system, for some longer. So I think that the answer really becomes kind of trial and error. If you can try to have half a glass at the time of dinner, or have a full glass earlier on, and kind of just see what happens. I felt there was something else I really wanted to point out here. Oh yeah, of course. I'm missing out on the good news here, which are all, that I always try to bring out the positive, and that's like last 3 4 nights I've been able to fall asleep between 10:30 and 11 and sleep for 6 hours without wine. That's great. I've only interacted with you a little bit, Chrissy, but I believe that's really an improvement. So that is great. And I want to add actually one more thing. Someone asked me a question. I wish I could remember what episode that was, but it was quite a while ago, several months ago. There was somebody who said that they had started having insomnia after kind of a bout where they drank a lot of wine, or actually a lot of alcohol, like a drinking bout. And then they got past their insomnia, they were sleeping well, but since then they had avoided wine. And that person asked me, should I continue this, or should I never drink wine again? And that was really interesting, because for that person, avoiding alcohol had become what's called a sleep effort. They were avoiding alcohol in an effort to sleep more. And it was an unusual case, because usually you shouldn't have any sleep efforts. You shouldn't do anything to try to produce sleep. And so I think for this person, it was a little odd, because avoiding alcohol had become a sleep effort. So I told him that, maybe you should, maybe it's not good for you to avoid wine or alcohol in an effort to produce sleep. So oddly, for that person, it became, maybe you should, enjoy life and do whatever you did before, and not believe that avoiding alcohol necessarily produces sleep. So just a little comment there. So Chrissy, thanks for commenting and all the support. And with that said, let's move to this question from my namesake, Daniel, who wrote a question that was Wednesday. So yeah, yesterday. Hi Daniel, I've been watching your YouTube videos for a couple of months now. Very informative. I don't have a YouTube account, so I can message you there, so I'll try here. I've been dealing with sleep onset myoclonus. that causes me to have anxiety about sleeping that has turned into chronic insomnia with hardly any sleep for 4 months now. When I do sleep, it's just like a light switch turning off and straight into vivid dreams that don't even feel like real sleep. And I wake up every hour or so starting dreaming again when I fall back asleep. I've become obsessed with insomnia and myoclonus, even though the doctors say nothing is wrong. I've been working nights for 14 years, also which is causing me depression, and also use alcohol for a couple of years to help me put me to sleep. I feared the fatal insomnia also, but quickly realized that was not what it was. It was so rare. Do you have any advice on what could be the problem? Have you ever heard of this before? I do have health anxiety and OCD for many years and have used alcohol for a few years regularly and also have night shift depression. Just to know a little bit more about me. Any advice would be helpful. Feel free to message me back if you need more info. If you make a YouTube video, please let me know. So, which I did. I told Daniel that I would make this video and or audio reply here. So a couple of things before I forget it. There was one episode that I thought might be helpful for you, Daniel, or anybody else with kind of similar things going on, and that's number 165, Insomnia Insight number 165, and there was somebody on the channel that was actually February, many months ago, Naomi, who had like real problems with this as well. Like as soon as she would fall asleep, she would jerk awake and be really anxious, and then she would kind of fall back asleep, and the same thing would happen again. One episode where she's in is 118. I felt there was more, but at least 118 is about her too. So, myoclonus, to me, I'm not an expert, I'm not a neurologist, but I know a fair bit about it. It's simply like a muscle jerk, right? And it's not at all uncommon to have like those type of muscle, myoclonus when we fall asleep. And a classic one that almost everybody has experienced is hypnotic jerks, where you're just about to sleep and then you just jerk awake. Now, oftentimes people with insomnia have kind of an excessive amount of these type of events, and then to me, like classic myoclonus doesn't have much of an emotional component to it. It's somebody that is about to fall asleep and then their legs jerk and they don't, and that's annoying, but not necessarily anxiety provoking. If you have a little bit of like you're a little bit OCD or anxious in general, then perhaps it could be that somebody has like myoclonus and that produces anxiety. But something to consider here, and I talk a lot about that in this other episode 165, is maybe it is more for some people it is more like hyperarousal related events, and hyperarousal is like in some form or shape, in my opinion, almost always the root cause for insomnia. And I talk a lot about this a lot, so you might have heard me say this before, but it's important, so I want to repeat it. Hyperarousal is kind of that state where it's kind of one step below worrying about something and maybe 2 steps about like being really anxious. Hyperarousal is when you kind of like you're very aware of what's going on, your mind is kind of running very fast, you're hyper alert, you're in turbo mode. A colleague of mine put it that way, you're in turbo mode. Now, what can happen is when you are in this hyper-aroused state, everything that we sense, feel, etc. becomes like exaggerated. That's why a lot of people with insomnia notice they say kind of weird things like twitches, like their arms twitch, or they have this strange tension or tingling, or these kind of jerky movements, sometimes a leg or arms, whole body, and often at that transition between wakefulness and sleep. And there's a name for those. They're simply called, I think, sleep-related, I forget it, sleep-related movements. There's a name for it that I forget now, but it's really what happens is as we're about to transition into sleep, your brain goes into kind of this mixed state. It's kind of partially awake, partially asleep, and then for some reason, like when you're hyper-aroused, you get a lot of those jerks. And so I think for most people that have insomnia and have these like a lot of twitches and jerks, I feel for most people it is that hyper-arousal, that kind of tension, heightened tension, that turbo mode of the brain that like makes these happen. Now, What I also really believe is that these events, whether they're twitches or tinglings or jerks, are kind of like a micro version of the insomnia itself, meaning the more we worry about insomnia, the more attention it gets, the more we try to solve it, the more things we do, kind of the stronger the insomnia becomes. And I feel it's the same thing with these events, that the more we try to figure out why we have these jerks, why try to solve them, try to do things, worry about them, the more of them we get, like the stronger they become in a way. So how should one, what should one do to try to have like less of the tingling, the jerking, and the hyperarousal? It's the same thing that applies to insomnia. It's like your basic, like spend less time in bed, and attention shifting, you know. As I also talk a lot about is, it's easy for me to say, or from somebody else to say, like, try to not think about it. That doesn't work. If somebody said, like, try not to think about a pink elephant, guess what? You think about a pink elephant, right? So it becomes a game of distraction, a game of like, when you're about to bed, when you go to bed, try to do something that keeps your mind off of thinking about, you know, what if this happens again? What if, you know, and that could be anything. It could be watching a movie, talking to somebody on the phone, or playing a video game, or listening to an audio podcast, or anything that keeps your attention away from like these jerks or movements or something like that, I believe really can help reduce them. So I hope this was helpful, Daniel, and I feel there was some more thoughts here that we're going to talk about. The alcohol, of course. You know, as we just talked about with Chrissy, you know, the alcohol has that kind of sedating effect, but it typically fragments sleep later on. And, you know, if somebody enjoys a glass of wine or something like that at dinner time and drinks alcohol for the pleasure of it, then that's of course fine. But if we drink alcohol for the purpose of that producing sleep, very slippery slope, of course. And I'm sure you know this, Daniel, but I'm just kind of repeating it for maybe other people. Yeah, I think, and by the way, yeah, I've heard this many times before, Daniel, not unusual at all. So yeah, hope that was helpful, Daniel, and thanks so much for sharing this. And with that said, we will move on to, actually, let's go here to this email. Now, this was I got an email quite a long time ago. Was it May 27th? So a few months ago, from someone named Ruel. At that point in time, Ruel had been doing better, was still having a little bit of sleep anxiety, but had already done some CBTI and was doing better. And if you want kind of the full background, then tune into episode pod number 17, where I did an extensive reply to Ruel. Now, here's the thing. Ruel wrote me 2 days ago and said the following: Daniel, I was at the clinic last night and they read my blood pressure at 145 over 100. Granted, I was tired from work. Maybe that had something to do with it. The doctor kept telling me to relax, get more sleep. That got me anxious and thinking about sleep again. Perhaps lack of sleep was causing the high blood pressure. Or what if the high blood pressure was causing the sleep issues in the first place? My sleep is getting better, but with just some occasional rough patches. What's your take on what's it? Sorry about that. I just got some messages here on Facebook Live. Chrissy, you got it, and Richard, glad to have you back. Sorry about that. So that got me anxious. My sleep is getting better with just some occasional rough patches. What's your take on the sleep blood pressure connection, if there is any? So that's what I want to talk about. Firstly, as always, trying to stay positive here. Super excited for you, Ruel, that you're sleeping better. That is awesome. That's awesome. I'm really, really happy about that. And now, back to the blood pressure. I work in a clinic, and oftentimes, actually just the other day, there was somebody that checks their blood pressure at home, and it was always good. And then, for some odd reason, it was really high in clinic. And I think that seems like your doctor is reacting the same way, as sometimes we have these off blood pressure readings for some odd reason, and they typically don't mean anything. Now, your doctor, this is actually so important. Like, we all get that kind of well-meaning advice that just make sure you get some good sleep, like make sure you rest. And to somebody that's never had any sleep problems, maybe that's, they just kind of, yeah, sounds good, yeah, I'm gonna get some more sleep. But it's, if somebody's had trouble sleeping, then that doesn't come up like that. It's like, how am I going to get more sleep? And also that implication of like, it's important for you to get more sleep for your blood pressure in this case. And that, of course, that can be super, super triggering. And I hope one day that everybody in the world will understand this and be more mindful when they say things like that. It comes from a good place, but still. Now, so this made me, Ruel, this email you sent made me maybe do a literature review. And I have the article that I read in my car. I was going to show it here, but I forgot it in the car. But anyway, and it kind of, so I looked at this review article from, I think, 2018. It was a pretty, like 36 pages long, and I definitely didn't go into it in detail, but I read through it, and it kind of confirmed what I thought, that it's kind of like many things in medicine, like if you look at a bunch of people that report having insomnia and also report having hypertension, like then there's kind of an overrepresentation, like more people that report having insomnia also report having hypertension, but it's not at all clear. Like there were some studies that show that if you kind of apply strict criteria for insomnia and hypertension, then there's no link. So it's kind of very, like many other things, very unclear. There's definitely not any causal relationship proven or shown. It's definitely not shown that insomnia causes high blood pressure or blood pressure issues cause insomnia. That has definitely not been shown. And my take on this overall is that if something has been extensively studied and nothing has panned out, it probably means that there's nothing. There probably isn't any smoking gun, but for sure nothing has been shown yet. So I think in this case, definitely, I mean, what your doctor says is like a reassuring message overall, and I think that is the general message to somebody that has insomnia or high blood pressure, that, one has not been shown to cause any problems with the other, so don't worry about it. That, I feel, is the right message. So I hope this was kind of reassuring and helpful to you, Ruel. And again, excited that you're sleeping better. It's so nice to hear that. Super, super nice. Okay. Now we are going to go to the last comment here, which is from Digital Ministry, who I had such a nice interaction with a couple of months ago, and now again. So this is a comment to Insomnia Insight number 245, and let's read it. Daniel, let me ask you this. There is a sleep expert online that talks about biphasic sleep. He finds the data on the human cortisol curve as possible evidence that we, as humans, may actually be innately designed, as it were, to sleep in two phases. He cites evidence that cortisol drops in the afternoon, and it is not necessarily triggered by eating a big meal or any meal at all, as the data reflects that folks not eating during this time also have a natural drop in cortisol. The book that was prescribed for me by the sleep doctor that I visited strictly prohibits napping during the day as part of the CBTI protocol. What is your view on this? Because if you believe that 6 hours of sleep is healthy, I feel 10 times better when I sleep 8. Then what is your opinion on sleeping 6 hours and napping 1 hour during the day? I have done this, and although I feel better getting more hours before sunrise, I find that napping reduces my feeling of malaise from not sleeping. It also helps me focus better when I get back to work. Lots of things to comment on. I think the important one is if someone like yourself, Digital Ministry, feel much better when you sleep 8 hours, then that may very well be a sign that you need more than 6 hours. And I usually just always quote 6 hours because when you study adults and how much people on sleep on average, it very consistently is about a little bit more than 6 hours, 6 hours 15 minutes, 6 hours 20 minutes, something like that. So I like to point that out. But that said, one of my points is actually that it's a spectrum, that some people need less, some people more, and maybe you need more. But and something to consider here, a lot of patients that I see in clinic or interact with on the channel are like, I feel great when I get 8 hours. And then I'm like, well, how often does it happen? Maybe once a week, once every 2 weeks. And how about the other days? Well, then I only sleep like 5. That to me signals that that 8-hour sleep is actually not quote unquote normal sleep. It is catch-up sleep. It's like you've been slightly sleep deprived, that's been building up, and then finally you catch up and sleep 8 hours. And that feels great. It feels great. And then we're tempted to think that this is how I should feel all the time. Not really, because that is catch-up sleep. So keep that. That's important to keep in mind, I believe. Now, so much to talk about here. This is a really great comment. Cortisol, it dips in the afternoon. I don't know, but it very well might do that. What is definitely sure is that, definitely true is that we have what's called a circadian dip in the early afternoon, typically between 12 and 2 p.m. In some cultures, there's siesta, kind of a little nap in the early afternoon. And so, yeah, there's the alerting kind of signals and hormones that the body produces to keep us awake, which, by the way, one of them maybe is cortisol, typically dip a little bit there. So it is physiological that we feel a little bit tired, sleepy in the early afternoon. Now, is that evidence that we actually are designed to sleep in 2 phases? I don't know, but I want to say this, that there is this kind of theory out there that we slept in 2 phases before the Industrial Revolution, before we had artificial light, before we needed to get up early to work and things like that. And I don't believe that. And the reason the reason I don't is actually this. Actually, it's one study. By the way, I think I can reference it right now. Oh, here it is. How cool. I'm going to show it here in my Facebook Live for those people that are watching this live or will watch it later on. And then I'll read it as well. This is a study called Sleep Duration in Pre-Industrial Societies. Actually, that was the title in a book here. But Natural Sleep and its Seasonal Variations in 3 Pre-Industrial Societies by Gandhi, Yetish, and colleagues from Current Biology, October 2015. That's the reference. Super, super interesting paper. So what they did in this paper, or in the study rather, was that they provided like these actigraphy devices, kind of like Fitbit that checks how much you sleep, and they're generally pretty accurate when it comes to general sleep. And they had people in Bolivia, Tanzania, and Namibia, I believe it was, wear these, and these were pre-industrial societies. There was no artificial light. It basically kind of hunter-gatherer societies. So how did people sleep in those societies? Well, guess what? They slept about 6 hours and 20 minutes. They went to bed several hours after it became dark. They got up before sunrise. Kind of timing of sleep mostly depended on kind of temperature. When it got really cold is when people typically woke up, and then they kind of went to bed about 6 some hours before that, and they didn't sleep in 2 phases. So I know it's just one study, but I thought it was pretty convincing. So I believe that mostly we have historically slept in one block of sleep. That said, as I mentioned, like it's a cultural thing too. Like in some cultures, I believe it is people sleep in the early afternoon. So by the way, like I think that's a strength of humans, and in any kind of successful organism, if you want to call it that we're adaptable. So we can probably function more than one way, which then goes back to your comment here, which is that if somebody sleeps 6 hours overnight and then takes a 1-hour nap and they feel good, perfect. That is fantastic. Now, another question was here, like if you're doing cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, trying to get past your insomnia, should you strictly not nap? I generally say when somebody's kind of new in clinic, I tend to feel like it's good to have very cut and dry kind of instructions. So I often start by saying like, don't go to bed before 11, don't get up before 6, and don't nap, just because it's easy. But then if somebody has struggles with that and says, I'm so tired during the day, I can't help it, then I say, well, take a 20-minute power nap or 30-minute power nap. And I think it's better to, for a lot of people, like having a pattern is very important. So instead of kind of like dozing off multiple times during the day and not having any pattern, it's better to have like a 20-minute, 30-minute nap in the afternoon. So I don't think it is necessarily very important to. I don't think it's important to be completely avoid naps. I think you can do really well if you have one. Yeah, I think we'll conclude there. So I want to say thank you to Chrissy and Richard for tuning in live. I was so excited to have you there, and everybody else who's listening to the podcast. Thank you guys as well. And comments, questions are so important. Please keep them coming, and I will be back with more, if not tonight, then tomorrow. All right, take it easy. Bye-bye. All right, that concludes the podcast. And again, the live we will finish here, and hope you guys have a really good day as well. Bye now.